Baki Hanma is a 13-year-old boy who is going to fight 100 bandits right now because his father Yujiro Hanma is the strongest man on earth, and his son's task, no matter what, is to become as strong as his father. In this he is helped by his mother Emi Akazawa, who is madly in love with Yujiro. She does not feel any love for Baki, but only helps him with training so that he becomes stronger. She was the one who paid these bandits to fight Baki. Although he is strong, he could only lay down 37 of them. Tokugawa watched this fight. Roughly speaking, this is Emi's subordinate. It was he who organized this fight. He also forced the head of one of the mafia to fight Baki in the future. His name is Hanayama, and at the age of 15 he is already considered one of the strongest in the city. He easily deals with each opponent, and only Yujiro is considered stronger than him. Since this haunts the young mafia boss, he agrees to fight Baki in order to fight his father afterwards. Baki trains in a special laboratory. But realizing that such training will not make him as strong as his father, he decides to destroy everything and find himself a new way to become stronger. While he was thinking about this, in the park he comes across professional boxer Muhammad Ali Jr., who is the undisputed champion in his weight. And it even gets to the point that he has to travel to different places just to find himself a sparring partner who is not afraid to fight him. Baki decides to challenge him and fight, but he gets knocked out with one punch. This was his first defeat, after which he runs home in tears. Baki decides he needs to follow in his father's footsteps, so he heads off to the mountains. There he is met by Ando, a longtime friend of the Hanma family. He once trained here with Yujiro, who also came to these mountains to become stronger. Baki tells him that he came here to defeat Yashizaru, a 3-meter demon, who is considered the king of this mountain. One of these was destroyed by Yujiro. Baki comes to this monster and begins to experience great fear. Ando comes running to help him, but Yashizaru inflicts very severe injuries on him. Only fire helped to scare away this monster. Because of the wound, an ambulance had to be called, which took Ando to the hospital by helicopter. Baki understands that he needs to step over himself and go through some kind of limiting human power, and for this he jumps off a cliff. While flying, he feels like everything is slowed down, allowing him to dodge rocks and land safely in the water. Having become stronger, he again went to Yashizaru, and during the battle he was even able to deprive him of his eye. They fought furiously, and Baki was badly injured. Ando, who was discharged from the hospital, ran to his aid, who wanted to destroy the monster, but Baki stopped him. He said that he and the monster were badly injured, but still continued to fight. They respect each other as an adversary, and therefore no one should interfere with their battle. Baki still manages to defeat Yashizaru, and the monster simply leaves after the defeat. He does not feel any pleasure from such a victory, because Baki badly injured the monster and even deprived him of his eye, and Yashizaru was simply defending himself. Feeling guilty, he heads to the monster's lair, where he apologizes to him and gives him a gift, the head of his wife, who was once destroyed by Yujiro. In return, Yashizaru gives him his phone, which he lost during the fight with Baki. Afterwards, he goes to his mother's house, who shows him Muhammad Ali Jr.'s recent fight for the middleweight championship. She tried to bribe him for 100 million yen to fight her son. But money does not interest him, and therefore he refused. After the win, he wanted to win the heavyweight division too. To do this, he gained 15 kilograms in 2 months, but Baki did not like it. He said that old Muhammad Jr. was much faster and more dangerous. He went to the gym where Muhammad Jr. is training and said that he considers boxing an imperfect sport, and even more so does not consider it a martial art. But despite this, he respects him very much and will support him to the end. These words deeply hurt Muhammad Jr. and others in this room too. They tried to show the guy how hard the boxers hit the bags, but Baki tore it apart with one punch, showing that at 13 he was the strongest in this room. The day arrives for Muhammad Jr. to fight for the heavyweight championship. But before entering the ring, his team is attacked by Hanayama. They begin to fight, but the 15-year-old mafia boss grabs Muhammad Jr.'s hand and squeezes his joints with his grip, causing his tendons and veins to burst. But despite such injuries, Muhammad Jr. continues to fight, and the thing is that he is a horseman, and it is customary for them to fight to the end. But Hanayama still finishes him off, which is why Muhammad Jr. is taken to the hospital. Baki found out about this and went to avenge the boxer, not noticing the guards along the way. Baki knocked him down with the first blow. No one had ever managed to hit Hanayama like that before. But their battle was interrupted by the police, who came to someone's call. Baki said he was ready to fight him anytime. Such impudence infuriates Hanayama, causing him to turn the car into a pile of metal. Baki then visits Muhammad Jr. in the hospital. He tells him that he recently saw Hanayama. And even though Baki's legs were trembling with fear, he is looking forward to their new meeting. Baki knew that the mob boss could attack him at any moment, and that's what Hanayama did at the mall. Due to the surprise effect, he managed to beat up Baki. To destroy Baki, he throws him out of a window. But somehow clinging to the rope, Baki gets back up, and already he starts beating Hanayama. After that, he takes off all his clothes and shows everyone his tattoo on his back, which is done by all the men in his clan in memory of a wandering man who protected his ancestor and thereby saved the family. They began to fight, and Hanayama used the same technique on Baki as on Muhammad Jr. But, surprisingly, Baki could move his fingers, which meant that the tendons were not damaged. They fought on equal terms, exchanging strong blows and tricks. When it seemed that one of them had won, the other got up and continued the battle. Baki felt like he'd won. But at that moment, he receives a blow from Hanayama, who slams him into the wall. After this blow, when it seemed to everyone that everything was over, Hanayama falls to the floor exhausted. At this moment, Baki gathers the last of his strength and goes to the mafia boss. They recognize each other and thank for the fight. Suddenly, Yujiro himself rushes in, with whom Hanayama dreamed of fighting. True, it seemed that the difference in strength was too great. Yujiro dealt with Hanayama effortlessly. Even though he was tired from the battle with Baki, he didn't stand a chance anyway. Then his father slaps Baki to sleep. Then he goes to Akazawa, scolding her for not being able to make a great fighter out of Baki in these 3 years, adding that she wants to test her son herself. To add motivation to him, he destroyed Yashizaru, whom Baki respected so much. He brought him the head of this monster and said that in a month he would come to fight him. Yujiro wants him to have maximum motivation for this fight, because if he disappoints his father, then Yujiro will destroy him too. Baki ate Yashizaru's teeth and then met Stridiem, Yujiro's friend. He told Baki that if he didn't want to be destroyed by his father, then he needed to train. Stridiem talked about a group of mercenaries in Hokkaido who see the battlefield in everything, and in order for Baki to become stronger, he must defeat them. Stridiem, without realizing it, sent him on a dangerous mission. It turns out that among these mercenaries there is a certain guy who is considered the god of war, and only Yujiro can compete with him in strength. Landing from a parachute, the mercenaries immediately grabbed it, but decided not to destroy it yet. They tied up Baki and left him by a tree. Freed, Baki begins to find them one by one and fight them, while learning something new from each fighter. He dealt with everyone, but suddenly the most frail of the mercenaries begins to yell wildly. It turns out that there are two personalities in it. The first is Namira, the personality of an ordinary soldier, and the second is the god of war, which was revealed to him after one incident. During one of the operations, he was captured and sentenced to destruction. At the moment when dozens of soldiers were ready to destroy him, adrenaline began to develop strongly in him. Guy was not destroyed, because his comrades arrived in time for him. But after that moment, all his hair fell out, and he learned to control the release of adrenaline, thanks to which his body is in perfect shape, despite the fact that he does not train at all. They started to fight, but Baki was unable to land a single blow, and all because during the adrenaline rush, Gaia begins to completely read the opponent's actions. Gaia beats up Baki with the hardest blows. And after he throws him to the bottom of the river, everyone thought that the tanks were destroyed, but thanks to endorphins, he comes to his senses. Since Gaia is a specialist in hormones, he immediately understands that endorphins are produced when pain becomes unbearable pain, and thanks to them, a person stops feeling pain and feels an incredible surge of strength. They start fighting again, but their fight is stopped by Guy. He scolds Baki for torturing his body so much, saying that his arms and legs don't listen to him at all, but because he didn't care about them at all. After that, Gaia is about to finish him off, but Bucky's body begins to beat on its own. Due to numerous trainings, his instincts have reached perfection, and thanks to this, he defeats him, squeezing his carotid artery and causing him to pass out. When Gaia woke up, he admitted defeat and invited Baki to eat as a token of their friendship. This battle was reported to Yujiro, saying that Baki had defeated the very god of war that only Yujiro could match. To which he replied that Gaia is a weakling, and he cannot be compared with him. And in order to prove this, Yujiro went to the Prime Minister, having announced in advance that he was going to destroy him. There he meets dozens of armed soldiers, but he simply did not notice them. When he got to the Prime Minister, he said that he had poor security. Then he ran out the window. Yujiro met with Akazawa. She tried to approach him, but he rejected her, and added that if Baki disappointed him, he would wipe his feet on Akazawa. Baki came to see his upset mother. She began to beat him because at the age of 13 he did not become as strong as his father. He asked her if she would love her son if he could defeat Yujiro. But she just called him an idiot, bit him and ran away. Desperate, Baki runs into 3 thugs who start beating him up. At that moment, Hanayama came to him. He supported him and said that he was even jealous, because his mother had recently died, she had cancer and even with a strong desire she could not bite her son. After the conversation, Baki began to prepare for the fight, which was supposed to take place at midnight. Before that, he decided to warm up for 12 hours, with the help of Muhammad Jr. and Hanayama, who came to support the tanks in the battle with his father. They started sparring, but during this time, Baki became much stronger and just playfully dealt with the head of the mafia and the boxing champion. Mercenaries also came to him, but without his leader guy, and all because he was assigned the task. He had to give Yujiro a lesson for what he did to the Prime Minister. But, as expected, he was severely beaten. Yujiro arrived at the battlefield and Akazawa was with him. Baki starts hitting his dad with all his might. But instead of fighting him, Yujiro approaches those who came to support Baki. He said that he was grateful to them for making a strong man out of his son, adding that Akazawa did not let him down and lived up to his expectations. After which, Yujiro decides to fight his son, but after 2 blows, Baki passes out. It would seem that the battle is already over. But Yujiro decides to finish him off, and begins to beat the unconscious body of his son. She's a bad mother, but even she has feelings. She decides to stand up for her son, but Yujiro did not appreciate such a gesture, and he hugs her tightly while destroying her. He did not stop there and began to beat everyone who was on the battlefield. After losing his mother, Baki decides he needs to become strong enough to defeat Yujiro with his bare hands. To do this, he leaves Japan for 2 years to return even stronger. All this time he spent in Brazil, defeating one fighter after another. There he heard that in Tokyo there are underground fights where the strongest fighters from all over the world gather. But in order to get there, he needs to meet with the organizer of these battles, Tokugawa. Of course, they knew who Baki was and whose son he was, and therefore they themselves really wanted him to perform. Baki rented a room from a woman whose husband was also involved in underground fighting. She also has a daughter, Koju, who Baki goes to school with, and she has no idea what he's doing because Baki hides everything so well. And he hides the fact that during these 3 years, while he rented a room from this woman, he became the champion of underground battles. Dappa is the master and head of the karate school. Tokugawa asks him to invite one of the best students named Kato to underground fights. He used to go to karate school, but got bored. He got a job as a bodyguard, but he got bored there, and so he went back to Dappa to find strong opponents. That is why he really wants to fight Baki, who will now have a fight with Kosho, who is known for his fighting style. The bottom line is that his body parts are so sharp that he's capable of slashing like a blade or severing his opponent's nerve, and that's exactly what he did to Baki, thereby disabling his right arm. But despite such an injury, Baki continued to fight with dignity, and then Kosho tore his nerve responsible for the vision of his right eye. After that, Baki started to miss punches. But as soon as Kosho decided to do the same with his left eye, Baki caught him in a power hold and threatened to hurt his arm if he didn't give up. But he didn't mean to lose like that, so he asked Baki to hurt his arm. In order not to spoil his opponent's career, Baki decides to just put him to bed, thereby winning the duel. At school, no one knows about Baki's exploits, so the bullies begin to extort money from him. But Koja stands up for him, although this did not help, and they had to flee from there. In the evening, when she was with her friend in the park, these hooligans approached her. They wanted her to pay them back for getting in the way of swindling money out of Baki. But with the help of her friend, Baki finds them. After damaging all the brushes, he saves Koju. Baki is the champion, and although many fighters fight him, Tokugawa determines his next opponent, so some of them decide to fight each other for the right to fight Baki. At that moment, Toba comes and scatters them like children. He is Baki's next opponent. Toba had been wrestling for 30 years, and the fight with Baki was to be his last. That's why he wanted to win, because, according to him, a wrestler has no right to lose outside the ring. Toba started throwing buckets like a child, to which Baki responded with accurate punches and knocked Toba to the ground. But he got up and continued the fight using wrestling techniques. To win, he is going to use a signature move. But the problem is that the years take their toll, and Toba has a bad knee, and such a technique will harm him. When he tried to use it, Baki managed to free himself in the air, and when Toba landed, he injured his knee, making his punches incredibly weak. Baki began to support him, and out of respect for him, hit his injured knee, showing that he was fighting him at full strength. Everyone enjoyed the fight and the audience congratulated both fighters. At that moment, Yujiro appears in the ring and knocks out Baki with one touch. Taking the opportunity, Dappo came out to him and challenged the giant who had once inflicted these wounds on his head. Baki tried his best to dissuade him from this fight, saying that Yujiro could destroy him, and in order to convince him, he decided to fight him. But Dappo showed his skill and assured Baki that he would give it his all. The fight between Yujiro and Dappo will be held before the fight between Baki and Kureha, a doctor who knows anatomy perfectly, and therefore made his body perfect. The doctor is Kosho's older brother. Before the fight between Yujiro and Dappo, Baki was very nervous, because of which he could not properly warm up and get in shape. And he is nervous for a reason, because even though Dappo is a strong opponent who was able to fight back the giant, Yujiro bears the title of the strongest on earth for a reason. He let Dappo throw punches, but as soon as he saw Baki, he decided not to linger and destroy Dappo. The loser was immediately taken to a doctor who tried to resuscitate him, but he failed to make his heart beat. And then Kureha, who is considered the best doctor in Japan, came to them. He gave a lecture to other doctors, and doing a direct heart massage saved Dappo. Kureha noticed that Baki was in a panic because of what was happening, and therefore he would not be able to fight at full strength. But despite this, Kureha intends to destroy him. It seemed to everyone that Baki was not stretched and his muscles were cold. But it turns out that before the fight, one of Kureha's patients came to him. She stated that the doctor experimented on them. They spent all the money on the operation, but Kureha did not try to save them, which left her and the other victims disabled. Baki believed her and her words motivated him a lot. Because of this, from the very first seconds, he began to beat the doctor, but since Kureha perfectly studied anatomy, therefore he strikes Baki with such blows from which he lost consciousness. The fighters who really wanted to fight Baki support him during all the fights. When Baki falls, they sympathize with him, and when he wins, they rejoice for him. Taking the opportunity, Kureha challenges Yujiro to a fight. But when he jumps into the ring, Baki wakes up and asks his father to leave. Yujiro said that Baki would take him down with just one hit. With his blow, he injured his stomach and won. From the injuries he received, Kureha needed an urgent blood transfusion, and therefore he decided to be helped by an invalid who came to Baki before the fight. She got up from her wheelchair, and approaching the doctor promised to help him. After winning, Baki decides to train even harder, and so he ran to the mountains to meditate. Tokugawa decides to hold a tournament where the greatest fighters from all over the world will come to compete for the title of the strongest, and for a belt worth tens of millions of yen. A total of 32 main participants and 4 alternates gathered. The fighters will be divided into 4 blocks, and the winners of their groups will meet in the semifinals. Baki decides to invite Koja to this tournament. His first opponent will be Reagan, a wrestler with tremendous strength, because of which he constantly had to restrain himself during his fights. But Baki easily overpowered him. After the victory, Koja congratulates him and asks why he is doing this, because in her opinion, they just cripple each other. To which Baki replies that every man at least once wanted to become the strongest, and many give up this dream after a while, but Baki, even if it's stupid, wants to achieve his goal no matter what. The next fight in the first block will be between the kickboxing champion and the most charismatic Japanese wrestler Iguri Kanji. Iguri began to make a show out of the fight so that the audience would hold him. And after a couple of throws, he wins. In the meantime, Katsumi Orochi, Dappo's adopted son, will perform in the second block. He is called the ideal karateka who brought karate to perfection. When he was only 5 years old, he performed in the circus, where he was noticed by Dappo. After one of the performances, a lion broke free and destroyed his father, but the 5-year-old Katsumi was able to pacify him. After which, Dappo decides to adopt the boy in order to raise and train him as his own son. The fighter who was supposed to fight Kato in the first round didn't enter the ring. Therefore, one of the 4 reserve participants will oppose him, namely the son of Yashizaru, who came here to find and avenge Yujiro for his destroyed father. Since the power between them was too great, it was up to Katsumi to fight the monster. At first, he cuts it with ease, and then they are going to completely destroy it. But the monster was saved by Baki, who attacked Orochi. They were about to fight, but Kato stopped them, saying that if they win their fights, they can sort out their relationship in the final. The next to fight is Hanayama, who will defend the honor of the street fighters. Baki wanted to greet and support him, but the mafia boss replied that they were at war, and Hanayama would confront all fighters who practice martial arts. His opponent will be Ineji, a representative of Japanese martial arts. He was able to strike Hanayama and even blocked his attack, but it turned out to be so strong that it damaged his leg through the block. And when he tried to take Hanayama's hand in a painful grip, he injured his spine. After defeating him, Inagi's trainer decides to fight him to protect the honor of martial arts. But instead of fighting, Hanayama decides to test his opponent and try to help him come to his senses. The next fight will be between Roland Gustav and Katsumi Orochi. Roland sees through his opponents and is able to damage any joint, which is exactly what he did with Orochi's right arm. But with one movement, he set it back, which means that Roland's main weapon against him is useless. Even though Roland tried to use the same move against Orochi that Baki had done against Kosho in the first season, the difference in strength was too great, causing Orochi to simply beat him up. Of course, Yujiro could not miss such an event, but by agreement with Tokugawa, he was forbidden to fight, so he came just to watch the fights. Yujiro recommends that Tokugawa add another fighter, Amanai, whose strength lies in love. Knowing what an opponent wants, he also understands what that opponent least wants and what kind of punches he can't expect. Meanwhile, in the third block, Silva, the master of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and Jack Hammer, the Canadian beat fighter, will fight. Before the fight, Jack meets Koju. He says that her boyfriend is Baki, a beautiful young man. But when Baki himself comes to them, he immediately gets into a fighting stance, preparing to fight. But Jack was not going to fight him, but only said that he wanted to see him in the final of the tournament. Baki himself was surprised at exactly how he reacted to Jack. It turns out that he is afraid of him. During the fight, it was revealed that the power difference between Jack and Silva was so big that Jack won it with just one punch. Some will think that Jack achieved such strength through training alone, but in fact, doping played a big role in his success. Jack was a bad guy. However, he spent 12 hours in the hall, boxing a pair. At the same time, he did not take breaks to eat or go to the toilet, but even such training did not give him the desired body, and then he turned to science. A scientist who once saw how Yujiro easily destroyed a polar bear wanted to create a drug that could turn a person into the same monster as Yujiro. But the problem is that his experiments were unsuccessful, and there was a risk that his drug would not be compatible for humans. However, this did not stop Jack, and he began to take doping diluted 10 times. With his help, he easily broke all records, but this was not enough for him. He told the scientist to give him the undiluted version, even though it might destroy him. That is why he was nicknamed the man who abandoned the future. And because the scientist created the monster, he decides to destroy himself. Before each fight, Jack takes doping, which each time reduces his years of life. After defeating Silva, Yujiro himself decides to fight Jack. But Baki intervenes, saying that Jack has no right to fight Yujiro. The father slaps Baki to get out of the way, but even then Jack refuses to fight him. He whispered something in his ear and left. This caused great joy in Yujiro, and he said that Jack had the same right to fight him as Baki. But why they are equal, we will find out a little later. Meanwhile, fights take place in the fourth block. Amanai, who got here on the recommendation of Yujiro, and wrestler Miyamoto will face each other. Amanai began to float in the air and attack his opponent with his feet. A man whose strength lies in love attacks his opponent with incredible force, so much so that the fight had to be stopped by the judges. They will be followed by Doppo and Chicago bouncer Richard Filth. Both fighters came out in suits. And even though Richard attacked very hard, Doppo still knows karate, and therefore he was able to carry such a blow with his fingers, from which Richard lost consciousness. But after the victory, Doppo helps his opponent come to his senses, and thanks for the fight. The next fighter is an old man who is fluent in Aikido. Many of the fighters had no idea what he was doing here. After all, compared to the rest, he looks like a child. But in the very first fight, in which the 3-meter wrestler acted as his opponent, he showed what he was capable of, while at the same time straining in no way. Then, in the second block, Katsumi and Hanayama will meet, who seized the initiative from the very beginning and could finish the fight very quickly. But he did not finish off his opponent, but waited until he got to his feet. This happened more than once, because of which Katsumi was still able to recover and begin to adequately answer Hanayama. He used his solar plexus to push off and kick. Such a blow is very heavy in execution, which once again shows his skill. He then throws 4 punches at the center line, but at that moment Hanayama catches his leg and damages his joints. However, Katsumi bandaged his leg and continued the fight. Hanayama almost won, but the support of the rest of the fighters gave Katsumi such motivation, after which he decided to deliver his signature supersonic strike. Katsumi had to strike a decisive blow, and Hanayama decided to take it with his back, on which was a tattoo dedicated to the man who saved his family. let Katsumi win, but two people carried him out of the ring, and he told his father that Hanayama could knock him out 3 times. The next to enter the ring are Jack and Misaki Kengo, who owns the traditional Shaolin Kempo. He began to wear Jack up to 20 beats per second, but at some point his hand flowed. The master again began to strike with his feet, but again after that his limb flowed. They decided to stop the fight and search Jack, because it seemed to everyone that he carried something forbidden by the rules, but Jack had nothing with him. Misaki bandaged his wounds and continued the fight, even though he began to feel dizzy and was about to pass out. As it turned out, Jack inflicted these wounds on him with his teeth. He bit the master so that his hand was injured. After that, Jack knocked out the opponent without any problems and went to the next stage. From such a performance, Koju began to worry a lot about Baki. She begged him to quit this tournament, to which Baki took her to his mother's grave. He told her the story of her departure from life, adding that because of this, he must by all means become stronger than his father, and take revenge on him for the destruction of his mother. That is why he wants to win this tournament so badly. Dappo and Amanai enter the ring, who, like in his first fight, begins to hover over his opponent. But Dappo was ready for this, and therefore began to attack his opponent. Even though it seemed that Dappo had to win, neither his son nor the other onlookers could imagine him as a winner. Amanai, after many blows, as if on autopilot, began to attack Dappo, and moreover, very successfully. He held him a grip, during which he injured his knee. But even after that, Dappo got up and was going to continue the fight. Not wanting to destroy his opponent, Amanai began to beg first Dappo and then Tokugawa to recognize him as the winner. Because otherwise, he will be forced to destroy Dappo. To convince him, Dappo was about to strike him in the eyes, but he did not have time to do this, because Yujiro attacked Amanai. He considered him a pathetic weakling due to the fact that he did not want to destroy a person. Since Yujiro ruined the fight, he decided to redeem himself with a small show. He asked Tokugawa to bring out all the fighters who made it to the next stage against him. But instead of them came the losers. They were unable to oppose him, and Yujiro defeated his opponents in their own style. He defeated the boxing champion according to the rules of boxing. The same was with the sumo wrestler and other losers. When only Kureha was left against Yujiro, Kosho decides to intercede for him, and the remaining fighters intercede for Kosho. Yujiro decides to destroy everyone, but a bullet flies into him. He is caught in a net and put to sleep with a sedative dart, a dose that would be enough to put the whale to sleep. And they decided to make Dappo the winner in a pair of Dappo and Amanai, because the judges considered the last blow to the eyes to be decisive, even if because of Yujiro he could not make it. After this performance, Kosho and Guki should fight. Since during the fight with his brother, Kosho held back, he could not show all his techniques, and therefore decided to demonstrate them on the old man. At the cost of an injured arm, Kosho carries Guk such a blow, from which the thin bone behind the eye, the fundus, was damaged. But it turns out that this particular eye of Guki was not real, because the old man was still able to defeat Kosho and go to the next stage. In the first round, Baki fights Iguri, who before the fight pitifully begs him to give up the victory, because winning this tournament is his dream. But Baki said he had exactly the same goal, so he would fight with all his might. During the fight, Iguri began throwing punches that Baki couldn't even feel. But it turned out to be a bluff, and when Baki thought he had already won, Iguri stabbed him in the lower body. He acted dirty throughout the fight, and at some point, he even called his mistress to the arena, who dressed exactly like Baki's mom. He knew it wasn't her, but he still lost concentration, which Iguri took advantage of. When he took Baki in his signature move, Baki got out of him calmly. Because there's a huge difference in stretch between a wrestler and a fighter like Baki, so a hold that is considered incredible in wrestling is just a warm-up for Baki. And with a throw over him, Baki wins. After the duel, Iguri comes to him. He thanks Baki, because in 20 years of his career, this was his best fight, which he really enjoyed. The next fight will be between Katsumi and Kyo Retsu, a kung fu master. Only the strongest bear the name Kyo. At one time, Retsu was considered a bad student due to his short temper. Once, during a fight, he destroyed a student, but he did not feel any guilt. And although at that time Kyo did not want to transfer this name to Retsu, he had to do this, because Retsu was recommended by such a person who could not be refused. During their fight, Katsumi got into his perfect stance. Although it is not considered a real art from the world of karate, Retsu stated that the level at which karate is now was achieved by kung fu 2,000 years ago. And he proved it with just one non-contact punch. The difference in strength between them was too big, so Kyo easily passed on. Guki and Dappo then enter the ring. In this battle of masters, Guki is ultimately victorious, although during the fight, Guki truly felt fear for the first time. He was afraid of Dappo with all his heart, and therefore, after the victory, he expressed his respect to him. But as Guki was heading towards the stands, Dappo told his opponent to land the finishing blow. But Guki's respect is more than hatred, and therefore did not finish off his rival. And after Dappo lost to Guki, and his son lost to KO, Dappo decides to close his karate school, because if he is not able to become the strongest, then he cannot train others for this either. At this point, Yujiro comes to his senses and heads towards Retsu. He teases the kung fu master and advises him not to look down on Baki as he is from the Hanma family. When it's Baki and Retsu's turn to fight, it turns out that Baki has already fought him thousands of times before the fight. He did this by imagining punches to Retsu. This is called shadowboxing. And thus, after watching all of Retsu's fights, Baki memorized all of his moves, and thus was able to fight him mentally. That's why Baki got all those injuries. But only these battles did not end with anything. Neither Baki nor the Shadow were able to win, and all because Retsu had not yet shown all that he was capable of. Kaio delivered a blow to Baki that sent him flying through the ring. But at the same time, Bake did not receive much damage, and therefore asked Kaio not to hold back, and show everything that a kung fu master can do. Retsu delivered heavy blows to Baki, causing him to temporarily lose consciousness. But it turned out that with severe injuries, in which there is a threat to life, the power of Hanma wakes up in Bak. He gets into Yujiro's stance and catches the opponent in a grapple. He twists his neck, and then delivers a decisive blow. Baki won, but there was complete silence in the arena because no one expected this turn of events. But fortunately for Retsu, he received nothing but a bruise. After the fight, Yujiro comes to Baki and scolds him for taking pity and not destroying his opponent. In the second semifinal there will be a fight between Guki and Jack. But before the start of the leg, the masters could not hold him back, as if refusing to enter the arena. Realizing that most likely now will be the most difficult fight of his life, Guki comes to the exit to the arena, where the fight begins. But instead of fighting normally, Jack once again just tries to bite his opponent. He first bites through his ankle and then bites into his arm, to which Guki responds with a throw. Then he gets on his knees and prepares to defend himself. The whole strength of the master lies in the fact that he turns the opponent's blow against himself, and the stronger the opponent attacks, the stronger will be the response of the master. But this technique has a weakness: if the opponent does not attack, the master will have nothing to answer him with. This is used by Jack, and once again bites Guki, after which he finishes off the old man with his foot. After the fight, Kureha comes to Jack. He said that because of the doping, Jack's body begins to break down, and if he does not give up the final, he risks ending the fight with his own life, because his body can only withstand one fight. But Jack doesn't care, so he just walks away. Thus, Baki and Jack are in the final. Before the fight, Yujiro and Jack agree that if Jack wins this tournament, then he can fight Yujiro. When the fighters enter the ring, it turns out that Hanma is Jack's real last name, which means he and Baki are half-brothers. That is why Yujiro then stated that Jack has the same right to fight Yujiro. Before the fight, instead of experiencing some kind of hatred, they, on the contrary, show mutual respect. This fight will be between half-brothers whose father ruined their mother's lives, causing them both to make it their life's goal to surpass Yujiro. They began to fight at incredible speeds, sweat and tears flying all over the arena. But it turned out that this fight with the fastest blows was just a warm-up, and only now Jack and Baki will start to fight at full strength. Like a lion, Jack attacks Baki, trying to bite him. But when a fighter opens his mouth, then his jaw becomes the most vulnerable place, so Baki was able to seize the initiative. But when he grabs him in the same hold that he once held against his father, Jack has a surge of strength and he easily pushes Baki back, after which, with tears in his eyes, he says that he simply cannot give Baki the victory, because that Yujiro made his mother suffer. Then he starts violently attacking Baki. But Baki has the same motivation, and he also understands how Jack feels. He hits Jack hard. Baki is about to throw his brother over him, but Jack holds onto the board with his teeth and then starts attacking Baki with his bites. And when he finally manages to bite him, it turns out that with his bite he hit the artery, and before losing consciousness, and maybe destroying Baki, there are about 3 minutes left. Despite this, he continues to fight. True, Jack's blows are stronger and he knocks him down. Jack tried to finish off his brother, but Baki counterattacked and made a grab. But when he once again tried to bite him, Baki damaged his ophthalmic nerve with Kosho's technique. He performed supersonic strikes, which he spied on Katsumi. Also damages his arm with Iguri's move. Then Baki has about 100 seconds left, but then Jack's body starts to break. However, according to him, this is only better, and this form is perfect. In this form, he was going to fight Yujiro. Jack delivers a punch that damages Baki's arm. After that, he begins to attack him with incredible strength, and all that remains for Baki is to endure the blows of his older brother. Jack stabbed Baki one after another until he noticed Baki's back turned into a devil, the same one that is also on Yujiro's back. Baki counterattacks, saying that now he will throw the last move, after which Baki will definitely fall, and if Jack remains standing when Baki holds him, then the victory will go to him. Baki grabs Jack and starts his move, and even though he resisted to the end, the body cannot stand this and Jack passes out, which means Baki's victory in this fight and in the tournament itself. Tokugawa brings a belt worth tens of millions of yen, but Baki does not have the strength to lift it, so the awakened Jack helps him in this, congratulating his brother and helping to lift the belt. After the defeat, Jack goes to Yujiro, but he begins to humiliate him for daring to come to him after playing Baki. However, Jack still attacks his father, for which Yujiro attacks and almost destroys him, but he spares him. The tournament is over and Baki wins. He thought that was the end of it, but he still wanted to fight. 5 criminals who are sentenced to execution decide to all run away to the east. However, they are not covered by any other device. The first of these is Dorian, who pretended that he did not show signs of life during the execution. After that, he attacked all the guards and fled, having previously written on the wall that he was going to Tokyo to find out what defeat is. The next criminal is called Hector. During his execution in the electric chair, he pretended to show no signs of life and then attacked all the guards as well. After that, leaving the same message as Dorian, he fled to Tokyo. A lawyer who came to visit a prisoner named Speck was destroyed by him. Speck pulled a gold tooth out of his mouth and used it to escape from the submarine, which was at a depth of 200 meters. The next criminal, named Sikorsky, was imprisoned in a place 100 meters deep. Once, rockets were fired from there, which formed rust on the smooth walls, with the help of which Sikorsky got out of there, and wishing to know what a defeat is, he also went to Tokyo. The last prisoner is named Yanagi. He was kept in a room made of glass that could withstand a missile strike. But Yanagi knows how to create a vacuum with his own hands, thanks to which he breaks this glass, and in the same way runs away to the east. Baki learns about this news, who is told this by Tokugawa, as well as Yujiro, who learns this from the TV. The school bullies, who really want to teach the tanks a lesson, decide to do it with the help of mercenaries, so that they decide this issue for them. But when they meet Baki, they immediately begin to feel fear, and for good reason, because Baki calmly deals with them. And when the school bullies decide it's time to play their trump card, behind them is Speck, who really wanted to meet Baki. He starts attacking Baki for fun, which causes the police to come to them. Speck says they're going to have a real fight very soon, and he hopes Baki doesn't disappoint him. After that, Speck surrenders to the police to live with them. Meanwhile, Dorian decides to look into the karate school in search of Dappo, but instead Katsumi decided to continue the business, who at that time showed his students a masterclass with Ko. To lure Dappo out, Dorian attacks his adopted son. Then Ko wants to understand the situation, but Dorian was not going to fight him, so he escapes with the help of an impromptu fire. Tokugawa met with Iguri to see his student, who was eager to compete in Tokugawa's next tournament, and he even said that he was ready to fight at any time. Their conversation was overheard by Sikorsky, and therefore decides to attack the young fighter. Iguri intercedes for him, but the difference in strength is too great, and Sikorsky also attacks him. Seeing this, Tokugawa immediately took Sikorsky to the underground arena, where the rest of the criminals come right after them. Tokugawa asks why they came here. Sikorsky was brought by Tokugawa, Dorian arrived in search of a cure, Speck was attracted by the smell of fighting that this arena is saturated with, Yanagi is Japanese, and all the Japanese know about this place, but Hector is here just to meet strong fighters. Tokugawa promised them that he would introduce them to defeat, and immediately after these words, Baki joins them, along with Dappo, Guki, Ko, and Hanayama. They introduce themselves and agree on the rules by which any of them can challenge anyone to a duel at that second. Dappo decides to attack his opponent first. He chose Dorian, who during the fight acted dirty, and with the help of a very strong fishing line, he damaged his hand. Using the tension in his muscles, Dappo closes the wound and avoids being destroyed. It seemed that now he could not fight, but according to him, it was even easier for him. Dappo then delivers a strong blow to Dorian and then hides. After winning the tournament, Baki began dating Koju and even took him on a date, during which he kissed. Just at that moment, Speck wanted to fight him, but in order not to distract the couple, Hanayama intervenes. Spec unexpectedly attacked Hanayama and then slammed him into a pole. With the help of a bench, he was going to finish him off, but the mafia boss turns out to be stronger, so Spec uses his signature move, namely a series of blows in which he is able to hold his breath for 5 minutes and strike without stopping. But at some point, Hanayama counterattacks and in turn begins to attack Spec. When it seemed that the fight was over, Spec decides to resort to extreme measures. He puts Hanayama's bullets in his mouth, which explode there, causing fireworks. His cheeks are torn from this, but despite such injuries, Hanayama still delivers a finishing blow and brings his opponent to the police. However, as he was about to leave, Spec comes to his senses and attacks Hanayama again, but this time with his trump card, which injures his knees. At the end, he grabs him, but Hanayama, who is known for his incredible strength, damages his joints first on his arm, and then on his hip, and starting to use the hold on his opponent, puts an end to this fight. Spec is taken to the hospital, where he is rapidly aging, and it turns out that he is actually 97 years old. Baki is a schoolboy, and hides what he does from everyone, and therefore when Hector attacks him, he simply runs out the window so as not to put other schoolchildren at risk. True, Yanagi, who pretended to be a gardener, still manages to get to him. He began to attack him with sickles tied to a rope. However, Guki attacks him by throwing a kettle of cold water at him. He then slams him into the ground, but the Yanagi counterattacks Guki, forcing Baki to work together and fight him together. Everything went well at first, until Yanagi decides to use his so-called poison hand. He believes that oxygen is the most poisonous gas in the world, because if a person inhales only 6% of oxygen, he will instantly lose consciousness, and since Yanagi knows how to create a vacuum with his hand, he can imitate this state. Just in this way he makes Baki lose consciousness, and only the police, who came to the school on someone's call, forced Yanagi to escape from there, which means that Baki was defeated. This is discovered at an impromptu meeting by Tokugawa, who had the most faith in Baki's abilities, causing him to cry. But they were prevented by Dorian, who first attacked all the guards, and then with the help of gasoline he was going to set fire to everything. However, at this moment, he is attacked by Katsumi, who really wanted to take revenge on his offender. First, he douses it with gasoline, and then sets it on fire with his own lighter. Dappo appreciated Katsumi's deed, but advised him to use his own body during the fight, because if you arm yourself, you sacrifice your dignity. After these words, Dorian comes to his senses and is going to fight Dappo, but Kato, who managed to become Katsumi's mentor, prevented him from doing this. First, he put him on the ground, and then completely damaged his ear, only he did it with a fishing line, and Dappo does not approve of this. While they were talking, Dorian managed to tie Kato and Katsumi with a fishing line, which is considered stronger than metal, but Dappo cuts it with one blow. Realizing that he has no chance to win, Dorian takes it out of his mouth and blows everything up. Thanks to this, he manages to escape from there, but all this time he was followed by Kato, who really wanted to end the fight at Dorian's shelter. Before that, Dorian covers his fists with fragments from broken bottles, and even though Kato attacked him so that he begged for mercy, this turns out to be just a hypnosis into which Dorian plunged him, after which he attacks him to such an extent that he miraculously remains alive. His body in the punching bag is found by Retsu, and Kato is immediately taken to the hospital with numerous grievous injuries. Katsumi decides not to let this case go, so he asks all the students of his school to find and bring Dorian to him. Even if he was in disguise, Orochi's people were everywhere, and they just delivered him to the amusement park, where they were already waiting for him. The first on his way is an ordinary clown who took Dorian to ride the rides. And already there Suedo attacks him. He and Kat studied together and experienced a lot, and according to him, he was completely ready to go to another world for him. Hearing this, Dorian decides to check him out. To do this, he takes him to a roller coaster where they were supposed to fight. The difficulty was that the battlefield was very unstable, because of which at first Suedo could not fight normally. But it turns out that once Dappo taught him the stance, with which the sailors fought at sea on a rocking ship. Thanks to this stance, Suedo was able to adequately respond with his blows. Because of this, Dorian decides to jump off this hill with him, thereby putting their lives at risk. But before the fall, Dorian caught his fishing line on a lamppost, which softened his fall, and Suedo survived this fall with great difficulty. Seeing this, Katsumi comes out to him, followed by Dappo and Retsu. It turns out that Dorian and Retsu studied martial arts at the same school, and according to their rules, they do not have the right to fight each other, so Dappo decides to go up against Dorian. It also turns out that after he lost his hand, Dappo went to a doctor he knew at the clinic, who performed an operation on him and sewed the brush back on. They start to fight, but Dappo is much stronger, which is why Dorian has to put him into a terrible, poorly animated hypnosis. However, even under the influence of hypnosis, Dappo was able to fight as before. The fact is that it is very important for him to finish the fight, and therefore even attacking the illusion, he imagined the same blows that Dorian was actually trying to deliver, thanks to which he was able to defeat him and make him feel fear. It remains to strike a decisive blow, and Kato must do it in a wheelchair. Although his condition is assessed as extremely serious, Kato gets up and ends this fight with his blow. After which he and Dorian end up in the hospital. There it turns out that Dorian has a small button in his wrist that can cause a large explosion when hit. After which he and Dorian end up in the hospital. There it turns out that Dorian has a small button in his wrist that can cause a large explosion when hit. While Kato was in a coma, Dorian comes to him, but decides not to destroy him, but to go to Dappo. When he comes home to please his wife with his whole hand, he finds signs of a fight, and at that moment a wrist blow from Dorian flies in his face, which causes an explosion, causing Dappo's head to be badly damaged. On the street, Dorina meets Retsu, who knocks him out with his punch. Accompanied by Retsu and a large number of guards, Dorian is taken to the hospital, but now even a cage is not needed to guard him. The thing is, after realizing that he never truly won, Dorian's brain decides to erase his personality, and now he's like a little boy who just wants candy. Sikorsky enters Koja's room and promises that if she does not scream, he will not touch her mother. Koja believed his words, but she believed even more in Baki, whom she began to call for help. At the same moment, Baki appeared and began to punish Sikorsky for violating his boundaries. He throws him out into the street to fight already there. But while he was getting to him, he managed to escape along the way, taking Koja with him. The Japanese government calls a meeting to raise the issue of capturing escaped criminals. Of the 5 fugitives, only 2 were caught. Then they were going to involve in this case the most famous criminal in the world, who is being held in America. A Japanese representative flew to meet him, but it turns out that his conditions in prison are much better than those of most outside. His name is Oliver, and the fact is that he is so powerful that the government decided to use him as a bounty hunter. Most of the prisoners who are in his prison were caught by him. During their conversation, Oliver receives a phone call and is summoned to a new case. Having flown to the place, it turns out that the former New York police officer closed himself on the upper floors along with more than 20 hostages, and he did not spare those who tried to escape. Once he carried out secret deals with one gang, but at one point Oliver came to him and ruined everything by attacking him so that his arms and legs were no longer real. Then he wanted to take revenge on his offender, and almost point blank he took the shots, but he did not even notice them. The criminal decides to use his katana, but she also failed to pierce his body. Oliver got bored with such a fight, so he throws the criminal out of the building with one blow. Such an officer cannot stand it, and therefore leaves for another world even before he falls to the ground. After completing this task, Oliver decides to go to Tokyo to catch the rest of the prisoners, because, according to him, no criminal should be freer than him. Upon arrival, he jumps out of the car at full speed to meet up with Yujiro, who was talking to Sikorsky about Baki at the time. It turns out it was Yujiro who told him to kidnap Koju so that Baki would have extra motivation to fight him. At that moment, Baki flies into them and immediately throws Sikorsky from the top floors of the building. After which he began to attack Oliver, because he said that everything that was happening was their fault. But suddenly Sikorsky climbs up to them, and he got up in the same way by which he got out of his prison. This time, he used shards of broken glass, and thanks to this, he was able to hit Baki with a powerful blow. But their fight was interrupted by the police, because of which Sikorsky had to run away by jumping out of the window. Then Baki wanted to end their duel with a decisive round, and therefore followed him to his lair to fight there already. Bucky's shorts gave him a slight advantage, so he was able to take him down after all. This fight was watched by Oliver, whose task was to catch this criminal. When Sikorsky heard his words, he immediately got up to fight him. But Oliver throws him out of a tall building with just one blow, and the police take him downstairs. When Oliver was looking for information on the fugitives at the police station, it turned out that Hector got to him faster, and therefore caught him by surprise by dressing as a secretary. They fight according to the ethics of fighters, which is why Hector put on leopard shorts. He started to attack him, but Oliver was much stronger, so Hector had to run through the ventilation. Kosho, who had become stronger, began to train his technique on Katsumi's students. He said that he had improved his technique even more, and therefore even Retsu would not be a problem for him. That is why he wants to try his hand against one of the criminals, namely Hector. With the help of Katsumi's students, they tracked him down. Hector at that time was in the same room with Stridium. He does not have outstanding fighting skills, so instead he uses blades that he once implanted into his joints with the help of an operation. Kosho comes up to them and immediately starts attacking Hector at one point, throwing him to the ground again and again. When he thought he had already won, Hector knocked out his jaw with the mechanisms of his arm. Kosho was about to continue the fight, but this time Hector used the button, which caused Kosho to be taken to the hospital, where he was tracked by Kureha, who had recently performed surgery on Jack to increase the limbs of the body, thanks to which he was able to grow 20 centimeters, which made him even stronger. Retsu accidentally meets Hector in the elevator of the store. They were supposed to fight, but the place wasn't right, so they went to a bar first. Retsu knew that in order to defeat Kosho, Hector used a button, so he decided not to hold back and used a kunai. First, he blinded his vision in his left eye, and then blasted his entire body with a kunai. Hector tried to escape, but Retsu caught up with him and continued fighting outside, this time using a sword. At the end, he took out a staff, and even the button could not prevent him from delivering the strongest blows, but suddenly Jack appears and knocks out Retsu with sleeping pills. He tells Hector to go home for treatment, because then he wants to fight him himself. Hector wanted to leave, but noticed how two hooligans were stealing from Retsu. He decided to intercede for him and drive them away. But when he was about to leave again, a dog attacked Retsu's body. Due to the fact that he did not want to leave the unconscious Retsu in danger, he guarded him all night while endangering his own life. After waking up, Retsu immediately grabbed his savior and carried him to the operating room, which was located on the first floor of the karate school. He was in a coma for 2 days, and he needed an urgent blood transfusion. He was helped in this by the students of the karate school, who did not want to be left behind. When he woke up, Retsu cooked and brought him healing food, but Hector could not stay there, and therefore went to Katsumi, who was teaching karate at that time. Hector thanked them for most likely saving his life, and then apologized, because despite this, they are still enemies. He said he was going to fight Katsumi in karate rules, but instead he donned a fireproof suit and set it on fire with flour. And when Hector was about to leave unnoticed from there, Doppo met him on the street, who had already managed to recover from that explosion arranged by Dorian. Doppo takes him to the playground where they started fighting. But the difference in power proved to be too great, and in this one-eyed battle, Doppo wins. Hector wakes up in the main office of the karate school, where a fire was recently extinguished. He is met by Katsumi and says that she will attack him until he kneels and admits defeat. But Hector did not even think of giving up, even if he lost consciousness over and over again. As a result, Katsumi hit him so hard that the doctor had to intervene. And when Hector wakes up again, one of the students tells him that Katsumi decided not to continue this fight, and therefore he simply gave up. In the morning, at his door, Katsumi discovers Hector, who nevertheless admitted his defeat. Meanwhile, Baki and Koju finished what they started, and when they wanted to do it again, they were interrupted by Yanagi, who really wanted to fight him. Then Koju offered him her help. Fortunately for Baki, her help was not needed, because due to the fact that he knew a woman, he became much stronger, and Yanagi could not even hit him. Because of this, he decided to change his fighting style and strike like a whip with his hands. This can be achieved by completely relaxing his hands and imagining that his whole body is liquid. This way he was able to attack Baki. However, it turns out that Yujiro once taught him this technique, while saying that this fighting style is more suitable for women and children. Baki lashed out at Yanagi and ended up grabbing him. But at that moment, they are joined by Sikorsky, who has escaped from prison in order to take revenge on Baki. True, even the two of them could not oppose him, and even Hanayama, who came to watch this fight, admitted that Koju made Baki much stronger. Baki could have destroyed them, but instead grabbed Koju and fled from there. Hanayama could have done it instead of him, but he decided not to fight and instead just go home. Katsumi wanted to help Hector escape to the Middle East. Using his connections, he was secretly taken on board the ship, and so that Hector would not forget him, Katsumi taught him the technique of karate and gave him a black belt as a sign of their friendship. But on the ship he is met by Yanagi, who decides to destroy him for losing his dignity and making friends with his enemy. To do this, he delivers a blow that deprives him of his only seeing eye. Being blind, Hector could not fight, and in order to avoid his destruction, he jumps from this ship. Jack then finds Sikorsky and challenges him to a fight. They will do this in a telephone booth, because, according to Sikorsky, Jack's dimensions will be his disadvantage there. At first it was, but Jack's strength turned out to be too great, and as a result, Jack emerged victorious from the telephone booth, and the unconscious Sikorsky was taken to the underground arena, where they continued their fight. Jack threw it against the wall. Realizing that he has no chance of winning, Sikorsky decides to use a stick, but Jack's body is stronger, so Sikorsky throws a nail at him, but Jack catches it with his teeth. Having shown his superiority, Jack makes a substitution, and Gaia enters the ring instead, who is known for his ability to use everything that surrounds him in battle. In his hands, water or sand can become a power for him, and given that the sand in the underground arena contains the teeth and nails of the fighters, this power becomes even more dangerous. First, Gaia attacks him with sand, and then decides to use this sand as a disguise. He raised a lot of dust, because of which Sikorsky could not see him, and at these moments Gaia struck. In the end, Gaia decided to bring Sikorsky to a state in which he would experience incredible fear. To do this, he deprived Sikorsky of his sight and delivered powerful blows every 10 seconds. From waiting between blows, Sikorsky begins to feel fear, and in the end he admits his defeat, begging for mercy. The next to find out their relationship was Guki, who challenged Yanagi to a fight. But when he began to approach the place of their duel, he saw the gate, the same one that was before his fight with Jack, to whom he lost. The fact is that Yanagi's right hand is completely saturated with poison. He achieved this effect through painful training with poisonous sand, which is why his right hand is extremely dangerous for any person. But Yanagi was the first to get Motobe, a master of jujitsu, who is fluent in 7 types of weapons. They started to fight. Motobe first drove a sword into his leg, then badly wounded his face, and then completely damaged his famous hand with his own weapon. Motobe asked Yanagi if he would admit defeat, but Yujiro suddenly intervenes, breaking Motobe's sword with one hand, then leans over to Yanagi and says that he lost. However, Yanagi did not agree with this. He said that they themselves will decide who will emerge victorious from this battle and who will lose. At that moment, Guki comes to them and realizes that those gates were not at all because of Yanagi, but because of Yujiro. Since Yanagi did not want to admit defeat, the outcome of the battle decided to reveal Yujiro, so he simply knocks him out. Then, somewhere in the mountains, Oliver finds Hector. He looks at his eye and says that he was blind due to the poison that Yanagi gave him with his hand. This was confirmed in the laboratory, where they said that this poison is perhaps the most dangerous of all. Unfortunately, during the fight with Yanagi, Baki contracted the virus, which caused him to lose a lot of weight. He was taken to the hospital, where Kureha stated that there was no cure for this infection yet, and Baki would most likely leave for another world soon. The hospital wouldn't save him, so Baki runs away from there. Together with Koju, he goes to Ando, because he considered that if the poison was created in natural conditions, then only Ando living in the forest can help him. Ando prepared medicine for him and did everything for his speedy recovery, but he told Koju that they came too late, and most likely it would not be possible to save Baki. Retsu arrives to try to help him, and knocks out Baki as a greeting. At the same second, a helicopter appears from which the Chinese come out. They load Baki's body into a helicopter and take him to China. In the meantime, before the exhibition that was to take place against Igari, Muhammad went for a run with his teammates. But they began to disappear one by one, and when only Muhammad remained from the whole team, Yujiro comes out to him. Muhammad, whose fighting style never depended on defense, almost for the first time in his life gets into a defensive stance, because his hands did it by themselves. He began to attack Yujiro, but could not inflict a single blow on him, and then the giant said that Muhammad was not a boxer at all. During his fights, he acts differently, and his fighting style is more like a martial art, and he wants him to demonstrate it. Muhammad attacks Yujiro again, and this time quite successfully. But he could not reveal his full potential. The fact is that Muhammad was hiding from the army for 3 years, and during this time his legs began to move differently, because of which he was never able to bring his martial art to the ideal. But at the same time, Yujiro was not going to fight him. After all, even though Muhammad is much weaker than him, Yujiro still respects him very much, because in those days, being black, he fought for the rights of minorities. Muhammad went against the whole state in order to defend other people's rights, and for this Yujiro respects him incredibly much. Muhammad asked what his goal was, to which he replied that he wanted to become stronger than the entire army of some great power. After these words, Muhammad asked him to meet his son, Ali Jr. He hopes that his son will someday fulfill his dream and perfect the martial art of Muhammad Ali. Baki has already arrived in China. When he wakes up, it turns out that Retsu has arranged for him to enter the Ritai tournament. After all, according to Retsu, winning it will help Baki heal his body. There are a few people in China who hold the title of KO, and once a century a great tournament is held to determine the strongest, but participation in it must be earned. To do this, Baki will have to fight with one of the strongest students of the Kung Fu school. Baki, being in such a terrible state, showed his skill. When a fighter attacked him, he dodged the blows by lifting and then lowering his opponent. No matter how hard the wrestler tried to take down Baki, he simply lifted and then smoothly lowered the fighter. In the end, without receiving a single blow, his opponent admits defeat, which means Baki deserved to participate in the retelling tournament. In addition to Baki, his father will also be present in this tournament, as well as the son of Muhammad Ali the Younger, who, like Baki, earned the right to participate through the fight. It all starts with the fact that Yujiro decides to test Ali Jr.'s fighting skills in action. Therefore, they start fighting right in the hotel. Yujiro attacks, but Ali manages to dodge the blows. Yujiro then uses the stance with which Igari defeated Muhammad. However, Ali Jr. took this stance as an admission of defeat, so he thanks him for refusing to fight and simply leaves their rooms. From such impudence, Yujiro fell into a stupor and immediately wanted to take revenge on the guy for such impudence, but Ali had already managed to escape. Meanwhile, in China, 12 fighters were supposed to take part in a tournament called retelling, but the Chinese Martial Arts Committee decided to add to the participants the winner of the last tournament, 160-year-old Kaku Ko, as well as 3 foreigners, Ali Jr., Yujiro, and Baki. The organizers decided to announce the upcoming fight right before it started so that the fighters could focus only on the fights. In the first battle, Yujiro and Ryu Ko, Retsu's mentor, meet. They began to fight, but the difference in strength was so great that Yujiro took off his face with just one hand. Retsu wanted to intercede for the master, but Ryu, despite such injuries, wanted to continue the fight. This time, Yujiro will finally knock him out. Retsu then tells Baki that his next opponent will be Lee, who has the most poisonous hands in China, and Baki is very lucky to have his first fight with him. Hearing such words, Koja considered Retsu to be a narcissistic egoist, and for this she decides to attack him fiercely. But he is saved from painful destruction by Baki, who reassures his girlfriend by saying that he will definitely win. Baki started the fight cheerfully and immediately kicked his opponent in the face. But during the blow, he touched his poisonous hand, because of which the poison entered his body. To remedy the situation, Baki sucked the poison out of his leg, after which he attacked his opponent again. Yujiro came to watch their fight, saying that Baki would defeat Lee very soon. However, his son began to receive a flurry of blows. From this, Lee's poisonous hand began to decrease and lose its poison, but at the same time, Baki could no longer continue the fight. As it turns out, the poison that Yanagi gave him is the exact opposite of the poison that Lee now gave him. Thanks to this, and incredible fortitude, Baki's body began to reject the poison and he was completely cured of it. Baki regained his strength and easily defeated Lee. However, his body has not yet recovered, and in this he is helped by Retsu, who first made him eat a lot of food, and then gave him a 10-liter bucket of water, to which he added 4 kilograms of fructose. After drinking all this, the body began to gain muscle mass. Meanwhile, the battle of the former champion of the tournament begins, which during the fight took off his opponent's underpants, and ended the fight with one click. During this time, Baki has already returned to his former form, and an incredible desire to fight anyone has come to him. Then he decided to challenge his father. He started teasing Yujiro, but Yujiro quickly calmed him down by slamming him into the wall. Now the fighter Woan Dorian, who was invited to the tournament by Oliver, enters the arena. But since Dorian lost his identity, he simply could not fight, and therefore simply took all the blows, and ultimately lost. When Oliver was taking Dorian away from the arena, they were stopped by Woe, as he wanted to fight him again, because, according to him, these foreigners do not have the right to have the status of a fighter. Oliver stands up for Dorian, and he and Woe enter the arena. Woe states that his body is as strong as a diamond, and due to hard training, no blow will pierce it. To which Oliver simply crushes his opponent, which means that it is he who goes to the next stage. Then it is Retsu's turn to fight, but his opponent was so weak that he won this round with just one grab and an accurate blow. Immediately after the fight, Kaku comes to him, saying that the level of young fighters in China is very lame, and the Martial Arts Committee is to blame. Therefore, as a punishment, he damages their hands. Since he did not want to see foreigners in this tournament, he founds his own Chinese team, in which he invites his son and his friend. After which he challenges the remaining foreigners. Yujiro is enraged by the arrogance of the Chinese, so he asks Baki and the others to unite and join his team. First comes Oliver and Ron, who fought in underground battles with criminal groups, and in all 30 years of fighting he never lost. Oliver started to attack, but Ron easily deflected all his punches with his hands in his pockets, and then was able to hit Oliver. It was followed by Baki and his father. Yujiro revealed the secret behind Ron's fighting style. It turns out that when his hands are in his pockets, they are already on alert, which means that you should not compete with him in speed of impact. This is exactly what Oliver understood, who stood in the same stance. He deliberately allowed him to strike in order to understand how he acts. Oliver then grabbed his head and stabbed him in the face with his head. And when Ron counterattacked, it turned out that Oliver's body was much stronger, and he simply injured his hands. Oliver then ended the fight with another punch to the face. That is, the Chinese, who promised a clear victory for each fighter, have already suffered their first defeat. After this, Kaku wanted to fight the rest of the fights on his own, but his son Shunsei demanded that each fighter get one opponent, so now he will fight against Baki. Before the fight, Retsu told him that Baki is incredibly strong, and he is the winner of the underground fights in Tokyo. But despite all the warnings, Shunsei ran to the attack, to which Baki finished the fight in 2 seconds in a couple of blows, which earned him respect from his father. Retsu will fight next, and a representative of foreigners named Jaku, he trains the Japanese youth, and in this tournament he is looking for those who will help him develop martial arts in Japan. In the arena, he offered to shake hands with Retsu, but it was a trap and he tried to hit him. However, Retsu clenched his hand so tightly that he couldn't do anything. After this, he again extended his hand to him and offered to form a team. During this proposal, he again tried to strike, but Retsu was again stronger. Once again, Jaku holds out his hand. This time, Retsu attacked first, but it was a ruse and Jaku catches him in a grapple and injures his hand. For this, the Chinese spectators wanted to attack him, but they were stopped by Retsu, who said that he would destroy everyone who did not leave this arena. It turned out that Jaku had injured his arm just to even the odds, and with his victory to force him to go with him to Japan to train youth. They started to fight again, but despite the injured arm, Retsu still proves to be stronger. Jaku respected him for this, saying that in fact his hand was not damaged, and only he could help him heal it. Although it looked like another trap, Retsu extended his hand to him, after which Jaku healed him. Let Jaku fight dirty, he did it because he had great respect for Retsu, and really wanted to take such a genius with him. Retsu, in turn, acknowledged Jaku's strength, because even though Retsu defeated him, he had to use techniques that masters of his level usually do not use. And after the victory, Retsu helped Jack get out of this ring. Then Khan, who is Lee's older brother, will oppose Ali the younger. During their fight, Khan said that Ali has no chance since he is a boxer and they don't use their legs to punch, because of which Ali simply won't be able to approach him, because the kick radius is much larger. However, according to Baki, this is not true. After all, although not noticeable, but boxers use their legs to hit the ground, and Ali proved this by knocking Khan out with 2 punches. This means that the Chinese have already lost, because 3 fighters were defeated. Then the audience started crying. However, Yujiro came out to them, saying that even if the fighters lost, China should be proud of its great master Kaku. And if Yujiro can't beat him, then those 3 victories mean nothing. Before starting the fight, Yujiro decides to give Kaku a ride in a wheelchair to ask what he sacrificed to gain such power. Kaku was once incredibly strong, and effortlessly overcame his rivals. But one day he met an old master who defeated him without any problems, and then he realized that martial arts are much stronger than muscles. He began to train long and painfully until, in his old age, he reached the ideal body for a martial artist. They began to fight, and even though Yujiro hit with all his might, Kaku was able to dodge. The fact is that he uses the Shawari technique, during which the entire body of the fighter relaxes and absorbs the blows of the opponent. Yujiro already understood how it works, so before the next blow, he pulled out the master's hair, which made him involuntarily tense up and take a powerful blow. This forced Kaku to change his fighting style and go on the attack. In appearance, he was a decrepit old man, but Yujiro did not want to take his blow, because of which he constantly dodged, and then completely drove him to the wall. It turned out that he did it for a reason. The fact is that in the Shawari technique it doesn't matter at all what kind of muscles you have, the impact force depends on the impulse, which is influenced by the fighter's ability to relax his muscles. He studied this technique for decades, but Yujiro was able to copy it on the move, which showed his superiority. However, he is not going to use this technique, because he has his own style, where the force of the blow depends on the strength of the fighter, and he shows this by destroying the concrete on which they stood. He began to deliver blows from which Kaku could no longer dodge. This fight was watched by Baki, who became insanely happy when Yujiro began to fight in earnest. Yujiro then decides to use his devil back. He stabbed Kaku and was about to finish him off. However, at the last moment he stopped, because the master had gone to another world from old age. Since he did not have time to defeat the opponent, there were no winners or losers in the duel. As it turned out, Kaku faked his departure to another world in order not to lose. He frightened everyone with his presence and told what was the matter. Yujiro is the strongest person on earth, which means that it is a great achievement to leave the fight without losing, which is why Kaku made his heart stop to also stop the opponent, because if he had dealt the last blow, he would have destroyed Kaku for real. After the tournament ends, Yujiro enters the arena where he is met by Kaku, who tells him that he is the winner of the previous tournament and gives him the title of champion. After that, Baki and the others go home. And already in Japan, during his run, Baki reaches a tree, where he constantly meditated and trained. There he is met by Ali, who offers to fight. However, Baki refused this, because only one person can force him to fight him. But Ali really wants to fight him, so he will do everything to make Baki want to fight himself. To do this, he invited his girlfriend on a date, where he proposed to her. Let Koju agree to go to a cafe with him, but she was not going to be his wife yet. Therefore, Ali decided to seek her again and again, inviting her on a date. He then wanted to defeat the fighters that Baki respects. The first of these was Guki, whom Ali knocked out with one quick blow. After him, Dappo became his rival. The karate master used his perfect defense, but Ali managed to dodge and knock out Dappo in the same way. Koja tells Baki that Ali was trying to woo her and asked what he would do. To which Baki replied that his task is to do everything to be with Koju, but who she chooses is up to her. After that, Ali wanted to fight Jack, but only the older brother Baki was stronger, and every time he threw Ali to the ground. Although he got up every time and continued to fight, Jack was no match for him, so he came to the next date with Koja completely beaten. Their conversation was interrupted by Guki, who really wanted to take revenge on Ali. They went to the park, and Guki said that the last time the fight was not real, and therefore now he will fight in earnest. Ali thought that now he would defeat Guki in the same way. But the master grabbed him by the finger and hit the tree, repeating this blow several times. So Guki was able to take revenge. He came to the date in an even worse state, and Koju called him an idiot because he didn't fight to the end. Their date is interrupted again, this time by Dappo, who also wanted to get even with Ali. Before their fight, Ali said that he would not pity the old man, so that he would tearfully beg for mercy. However, his words multiplied by 0 when he broke his hand on Dappo's head. He remembered his own words to him, and therefore also did not regret hurting Ali's hands. As a result, he brought him to such a state that Ali simply could not continue the fight, which means that he also took revenge, but Ali did not want to admit his defeat. When he was lying in his room, a servant came to him, saying that someone was waiting to meet him. It turned out that this man was his father. Muhammad, who was completely ill, trained for 5 years to fight his son, because once it was Ali who gave him the first knockout in his career. However, in this state, Ali was not going to fight. Then Muhammad began to tease him, so Ali agreed to a duel, but very quickly lost. It turns out that Muhammad knew that Ali had lost 4 fights in a row, and therefore wanted to teach him a lesson, adding that Ali had already done everything he could, so he suggested that he give up and not torture himself. However, Ali said that defeats hardened him, because his rivals were older people who, despite their age, are constantly improving their skills, so Ali can no longer lose and lose ground. As it turned out, Tokugawa is a big fan of Muhammad, so he tells him about all the news that happens in the world of underground fighting. He came to them to tell them that Baki accepted the challenge and agreed to fight Ali, so Ali Jr. must do everything to defeat him. When Ali was training in a cast and preparing for a fight, his father came to him and said that Baki would fight him only on one condition: Ali must enter the ring in his perfect shape. After hearing that, Ali's body began to recover at an incredible rate, and as a result, his entire body healed from injuries. The fathers of the fighters met together to discuss the upcoming fight. Muhammad asked what his son was worth, to which Yujiro replied that Baki is not perfect now, but despite this, he is one of the strongest in the world. Ali met with Koju and promised her that he would definitely defeat Baki and win her heart. Experienced fighters made their predictions about the outcome of the fight, and everyone said that Ali Jr.'s style would be completed during the fight with Baki, which is why he must win. The day of the fight came, and Ali promised himself that he would walk out of this ring on his feet. However, instead of Baki, Yujiro appeared in the arena. He said that Baki will attack his father in the near future, and even though he is only 18 years old, he is capable of a lot. At that moment, Baki himself came to them, and Yujiro told them to fight to the end until someone passed out. The fight began, but despite all the pathos and predictions before their battle, Baki knocks out his opponent with just one blow. Then Ali wakes up and is about to continue the fight, but while he was talking about how he was going to destroy him, Baki tests his lower body for strength. Then he finishes off with his foot and takes him into the grip. However, Muhammad stops him with his blow, because if he had not intervened, Baki would have destroyed his rival. Although Muhammad violated the rules of the fight very seriously, Baki was not at all angry with him, because in fact he was ready to destroy Ali. And after the victory, Baki challenges Yujiro to a fight to put an end to his story. Yujiro recognizes his son and considers him a worthy opponent, so now Baki is ready to fall victim to him and eat him as a reward. After the fight, Ali was crying and in great pain, and Koju came to support him at this difficult time. Then all of Baki's friends were informed that he was about to fight his father, so they came to watch him prepare for the fight. They recognized that Baki is no longer a green boy, now he is one of the strongest, and very different from other fighters. Even Baki's training was on a completely different level, everyone watching him could see the visualized figure of his father. Yujiro prepared for battle by fighting wild animals. Saman is the leader of a special task force in Africa. He gathered many troops to destroy the enraged elephant. Journalists accuse him of a crime, since you can't just destroy an animal. But Saman justifies himself, saying that his troops were trampled by the elephant himself, and with his own hands he killed the elephant Yujiro. Then the journalists do not believe him, accusing him of lying, but Saman saw everything with his own eyes, so he just gets up and leaves, because he told the whole truth. Meanwhile, Baki catches a praying mantis. The next day, a 5th grade student named Rumina Ayukawa decides to challenge Baki after being persuaded by his friends. He approaches the bullies of the school and asks to fight the strongest, but they only laugh at him, but still decide to give him a chance, and so Baki fights him. When Baki came to the field, Rumina thought he couldn't be the strongest in the school, but after he takes off his jacket and Rumina sees his muscles, Rumina becomes too small compared to Baki. The fight starts, and Baki quickly moves to the side, slapping his opponent's ass. Rumina flies off into a shallow river, leaving a handprint on the buns. Baki holds out his hand to him and invites him to be friends. At that moment, Rumina realized that he was a man. They sit and chat nicely, but Stridium arrives, informing Baki of Yujiro's victory over the giant elephant. Hearing this, Baki starts training with his shadow as his opponent. He struck in front of him and dodged the opponent's invisible blows. He imagined Iron Michael, who in the history of boxing was considered the strongest on the planet. Michael delivers real punches to Baki, after which he falls to the ground with bruises on his body. Then Baki decides to finish the fight with one kick, and he succeeds. At home, Baki says that Iron Michael was just a warm-up, and the real opponent is waiting for him in the basement. As they go down to the basement, Rumina walks over to the table and sees a small praying mantis. It turns out that small insects are stronger than any creature in this world, since they can lift their own weight 100 times. Also, if they are enlarged to the size of a human, they can easily defeat any creature with their claws. So Baki starts imagining a big praying mantis, as it will be 100 times stronger than the elephant that Yujiro fought. They start to fight, but the mantis is too strong for Baki. Baki grabs the praying mantis, but it's useless as he can see everything that's going on even from behind him. Then Baki decides to use the praying mantis style, which was invented by a monk named Shomu. One day, Shomu noticed a sparrow and a praying mantis fighting. He thought that the sparrow would win now, but to his surprise, the praying mantis won. Shomu took the praying mantis with him and began to study its techniques, hence the praying mantis style was born. Baki stood up and started to fight. After landing a couple of hits, he wins the imaginary praying mantis. Stridium finds out about this and comes to Yujiro to tell him about it. But Yujiro laughed at this, as he simply defeated the figment of his imagination. Meanwhile, Baki kidnaps the president to be sent to an Arizona prison, where Oliver is also being held. The president is shocked by such a statement, but cannot do anything, so Baki is sent to prison. There he meets with Oliver, but he does not want to fight him. Then Baki stabs him, but Oliver doesn't even move. However, before he can fight Oliver, who is number 1 in this prison among 4,000 fighters, he will have to fight the second most powerful number, whose name is Jun Guevara. The next day, the prisoners are checked, where no one is allowed to move or interact with each other. But Guevara calmly walks around the cells and communicates with the guards as with friends. During dinner, he is the only one who is given an omelet, and everyone else is given regular portions. Opposite him sits a sumo wrestler who has never lost before and wants to challenge Guevara so that he can be given special treatment. Guevara accepts his challenge and they go to the gym to fight according to sumo rules. Despite Guevara's body, he cannot lift it. Guevara slaps him and puts him on the floor. Not wanting to lose, he attacks him, but again finds himself on the floor. Then Baki understands why he is second, This explains his second generation in relation to Oliver. But the guard intervenes in their dialogue, as the prisoners are not allowed to talk. Baki grabs a guard's baton and bends it like jelly, causing him to be sent to a cell without food or water. One of the prisoners secretly comes to him and tells him the story of why Guevara is so respected. It turns out that Guevara was the president of one island with a population of 20,000 people. He was a pirate who captured ships and took gold from there. The US authorities did not like this, and they decided to use the people from the island as slaves. They were not considered equal and they were enslaved. Then Guevara set a goal to achieve the independence of the island. Guevara began to train people in martial arts in a special way, and when they were ready, they began to rebel. The US authorities came up with a plan to crush this uprising and prevent people from knowing the truth. However, in the office, disguised as a security guard, was one of Guevara's men, who showed him a live video of Guevara breaking into the president's house and sitting next to his family. This shocked the president, and he achieved what no one else had been able to do. But the president wanted to take revenge on him, and so he hired Oliver, who was stronger than Guevara, and therefore he ended up in prison. Suddenly, a security guard arrives and wants to punish the old man for talking, but Baki sticks up for him and kicks him. The guard flies a few meters away, and then Baki finishes him off, causing the guard to accidentally tumble over the fence. Baki decides to save him. Hanging several hundred meters above the ground, Guevara comes, saying that it is not necessary to save him, because he will not even remember about it. But Baki, despite his words, still saves the guard, and after 3 days in the Chancellor, he returned to normal life in prison. At this point, the guard is given a check for $2 million from the head of the International Boxing Organization, as they don't want Iron Michael to fight in the tournament. That's why they hired 3 twins who work well as a team. They are called Mouth, Lips, and Teeth, as only together they are strong. In prison, Iron Michael was invited to the courtyard where the trio were waiting for them. They strike one after the other, because of which Michael becomes afraid of them and pressed himself against the corner. He got into a perfect defensive stance, but it didn't help him dodge 3 hits at once. Then they decide to attack him even harder, and thus defeat Michael. They are going to finish him off, but having twisted into a bun, Guevara rolls. His goal was to teach the trio a lesson and prove that he alone could defeat them. Then they decided to stand in a fighting stance, while forming a triangle, the most powerful figure in the world. But Guevara just wets one of them and creates a circle. Then he just lay down, giving the trio a chance to show their full strength. The trio attacks him with a team, but Guevara does not feel their blows. Then he gets up and calls on the power of the wind, which gives him strength. But the twins think that it was just a show, and so they create a more powerful figure, a tetrahedron. They attack him, but he counterattacks one of them, showing his incredible strength. Then one of them starts to run away in fear, and the other sits in the corner in shock. Michael regains consciousness and thanks Guevara for helping him. In the cell, Baki offers to fight Guevara, who immediately agrees. Suddenly, Oliver breaks the iron door with his hands to invite Guevara to fight him too. It turns out they have a lot in common. They both went through all the stages of growing up, from a little boy to a man, and they both never lost a fight. Oliver fights for the sake of the girl, to show himself in all its glory, while Guevara fights simply because he likes it, and he has no certain incentive. Baki decides to interrupt their conversation, but is immediately hit by 2 of his favorite fighters. Baki crashes into a fence and passes out. Oliver has a handkerchief that he bought in the city where his Lady of the Heart lived. Even the smell is not her handkerchief motivates Oliver to fight. Then he gives Guevara a sniff, but he spits at him. Oliver did not expect this, so he runs away in tears. Guevara decides to ask the inmates what kind of girlfriend Oliver has. To which he receives the answer that no one knows, and there are rumors that Oliver simply invented it. Then he gives the jar to one of the inmates, telling him to give it to the ring. Being the president of the island, the weakest and most cowardly boy climbed a mountain raging with wind and lightning, and took air from this mountain for a whole day. He presented it to Guevara, for which he received the title of the most courageous person on the island. Meanwhile, Oliver dresses up to go to his beloved. After giving her flowers, he receives a flurry of negative words from her, as well as various objects in the face. Despite this, he continues to love her. The next day, the cells were empty and the prison itself was empty. This is because on this day the fight between Oliver and Guevara takes place. Guevara enters the ring, and they give him the same jar. And Oliver enters the ring with a bed on his back, on which lies his girlfriend. Having lowered the bed to the ground, everyone observes the incredible beauty of the girl named Maria, who does not even fit into the frame.
This is Oliver's motivation, and that's why he wants to win.
Guevara, opening the jar, represents a raging sea with a wild wind, which gives him great strength.
Guevara offers to play a game.
Holding on to opposite ends of the handkerchief, they must exchange blows, and the one who first releases the handkerchief is considered the loser.
Oliver agrees to such terms. Guevara begins his series of punches to take Oliver's concentration off the handkerchief.
But almost falling, Oliver holds on to the handkerchief with his fingertips. Then Guevara had to drag him upstairs, because he himself would let go of the handkerchief, unable to withstand the pressure of Oliver. Oliver begins to taunt Guevara, saying that he will hold the handkerchief with his little finger. So Guevara pulls a hair from his beard and sends it to Oliver's eye, and then completely knocks him down. In flight, Oliver grabbed his handkerchief, which Guevara begins to mock. But Oliver then let go of the handkerchief and will not try to hold it, and Guevara decides to support this idea. They exchange blows and Oliver knocks his opponent to the ground, but he still keeps the handkerchief on the back of his hand. Baki calls it not a fight, but a game with a piece of cloth, so he lies down next to Maria and hugs him. At this moment, the handkerchief is blown away by the wind, and Oliver is shocked by what he saw. Maria begins to insult Oliver, calling his fight insignificant. Guevara decides to end the fight with his move, but is stopped by Oliver, who is motivated by Maria's words, and sends Guevara several meters forward with one blow and slams him into the wall. Everyone begins to rejoice and congratulate Oliver on his victory, but suddenly Guevara comes to consciousness and starts to get up, while singing a song. He attacks Oliver, but Oliver deflects his attack and slams him into the floor with full force.
Meanwhile, Yujiro travels to Guevara's aid along with the President of the United States, as he wanted to fight Guevara. But Guevara's aide also promised the US President to protect him.
Then he is confused as he doesn't want to fight Yujiro but also wants to protect the President. So he decides to attack the President and throws him out the window. Yujiro catches him and tells him he did everything right and asks for Guevara's location. Meanwhile, the fight between Guevara and Oliver continues. Guevara gets up and remembers his people, which motivated him, and he decides to deprive Oliver of support. All martial arts use the foot on the ground during the fight, and this has been distorted in different styles, so few people know about it.
Guevara knocks Oliver off his feet and slams him into the floor.
But it turned out that these were his thoughts, and in fact, Oliver counterattacked Guevara in flight and slammed him into the floor, thus ending the fight, and he remains the strongest in America. Oliver tells Baki that his muscles helped him win, and Guevara refused them, as a result of which he lost.
If Oliver does not restrain his muscles, then he himself will be at the height of the building.
And he built up muscles for his beautiful Mary, whom he lifts and leaves the arena. The next day, Guevara escapes from prison, as his goal was to fight Oliver, which is what Guevara promised his people. Guevara leaves only his own dollars, which are considered an invitation to his island.
Baki decides to imitate Guevara and decides to break out of prison.
However, he does not do it quietly, but at the same time knocking out the guards. At the entrance, he is met by many guards and the head of the prison, where Baki reveals that his goal was to become free among the prisoners, like Oliver. The chief assures that this is impossible, but at that moment his glasses break. It turns out that Baki broke his glasses in a few milliseconds that he didn't even feel it. But he also snatched a button from every guard, which made them afraid of Baki. Then he asks the boss to hug him and take him to freedom, which the boss does.
After being released, Baki asks to go back to prison. He was just testing to see if he could become a free prisoner, and he succeeded.
Angered, Oliver arrives on his motorcycle, realizing that he is no longer the only one with his own license. Baki starts to mock this, which infuriates Oliver, but he quickly lets it go so as not to lose his reputation.
As Baki leaves, Oliver crashes his motorcycle in anger.
Baki was imprisoned in the Chancellor, where Oliver came to urinate on him, showing that he is more important than him and this is his territory. To which Baki replied that he would beg him for a fight and starts laughing at him. The head of the prison comes to Oliver talking about Baki's act, and suggesting that Baki and Oliver fight. To which Oliver agrees and announces the fight in 2 weeks. He comes to tell Baki about this, but he doesn't want to wait, so he attacks Oliver. In response, Oliver delivers a punch that slams Baki into a wall and breaks through it.
Baki breaks his fingertips with ease and continues the fight.
He strikes to the body, but Oliver catches his hand and pulls him into his cell, breaking through the wall even more in the process. He starts waving Baki like a rag, and then completely punches through all the walls of the cells and the door through which Baki flies out to the first floor. After this, Baki gets up and tries to counterattack, but Oliver catches his leg. Then Baki unleashes a flurry of attacks with his other foot, but Oliver doesn't feel his kicks and advises the guards to move away. Oliver is bored with his attacks and slams him into the floor. Baki recalled that feeling when he fought his father 5 years ago.
A sense of nostalgia restored his strength, and a devil's face, Hanma's true strength, appeared on his back. He jumped to his feet and wanted to continue the fight. Oliver decides to attack Baki, but it turns out that in a split second, Baki knocked out his opponent, and he falls unconscious to the floor. But when Oliver regains consciousness, he decides to use the form of a ball and twist his body to such a state that it shocked Baki. It turns out that Oliver learned to control his muscles so that he could easily contract them in any part of the body. Then Baki decides to kick him, but Baki doesn't even budge. Baki remembers that he saw this technique in Kureha, so he decides to defeat him with the same move that defeated Kureha. Baki strikes, but nothing happens. Suddenly, Oliver grabbed his arm and swallowed Baki into his body. Baki felt the full force of Oliver's grip on him, and then he spat him out. Bucky's body is immobilized, so Oliver invites him to surrender. But Baki replies that he is not going to give up and they will fight to the victory. Therefore, Oliver delivers furious attacks to Baki, but he dodges. Then Oliver twists a second time and absorbs Baki, but Baki breaks out of his trap and counterattacks him. Iron Michael warns Baki to stop the fight, as their strengths and weight classes are not evenly matched. But he took it as advice, and they began to fight. They hit each other one after the other, but Baki hits much harder than Oliver, and therefore knocks him out. His goal was for Oliver to retreat, first to the wall, and then further. When he pushed him against the wall, Oliver makes a crushing blow. But even this blow was deflected by Baki with his own head and they broke through the wall. Baki came to his senses and there was no one in front of him. It turns out that he knocked out Oliver almost at the start. Maria comes running and at that moment Oliver comes to his senses. He takes Maria to the room, and the next day he announces to all the people that he lost to Baki, and now Baki is the strongest in America and the Arizona prison. However, Oliver did not want to accept this, so he ordered the warden to release Baki to freedom, because he will remain the strongest in prison. Baki leaves the prison with a helicopter escort. Meanwhile, Stridium tells Yujiro about Baki's victory over Oliver, saying that the battle between father and son will be legendary. At the radioactive waste factory, the diggers froze at what they saw. At a depth of 701 meters of rock salt, they found the frozen body of a man fighting a monster. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, like and press the bell so as not to miss new videos. AniMap was with you. Bye everyone.